friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction being yo 764. Shot in that neighborhood, my brothers and sisters. As we proceed to give you what you need, it is another Wednesday. So y'all know who we're about to go back to. Mike from that chapter. It is always a delight when we get to go back to Mike. And the title of the video is Detectives Discover Arson Investigator Hides a Horrifying Secret. Now it sounds to me, being team, that the freaking arson investigator may have been the one who freaking lit the fire in the first place. Long story short, short story long. But I don't know. But we're about to see. But before we see, my brothers and sisters, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need, please. It is another That Chapter Wednesday. Y'all got what y'all need. Y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
Let's begin with Chapter 1, 1988. Santa Ana winds typically diminish in the late afternoon and become benign breezes into the night. This hot August evening wasn't typical. Nobody will ever catch me, Aaron whispered. It was unlikely that Aaron would ever become a suspect, and he knew it. His time delay devices gave him from a couple of minutes to almost an hour before the fire actually started after placement. Aaron had already killed 5 people in one of his fires. The people just acted stupidly, and their deaths had nothing to do with the fact he set the fire. They just reacted too slowly. That is a couple of passages from the opening chapter of Points of Origin, a novel from 2001. This book has basically everything to do with this case, because you know what they say, write what you know. But John L. Orr took that as know what you write. And he took that to the most extreme level. When a number of arson attacks struck Los Angeles and surrounding areas over a period of about 10 years, all hands would be put on deck to investigate who was responsible. Who was this killer serial arsonist? Well, perhaps old John was not only the lead arson investigator, but he was also looking for material for this book. Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this solo video, we are going to be looking at the disturbing case of, I think, the most infamous killer serial arsonist of all time. John loved fire. He became a firefighter, then he became an arson investigator, then he became a wannabe writer. But he could not separate fact from fiction. Or at least that's what he said the police couldn't do when they finally caught him. Now, you and I, let's give this disturbing story a go.
Let's give it a go. And get whatever you may need. And it just seemed like it's gonna be one of those classic stories, being team, of the freaking killer telling on their freaking killer self. You know what I'm saying, man? This dude is gonna end up snitching on himself in roundabout ways. At least that's what I'm thinking so far. Let's give it a go.
California is no stranger to fires. It's in the news all the time with these tragic wildfires that seem ever present in California, and specifically in Southern California surrounding Los Angeles. But for some reason, psychopaths out there will deliberately start these fires, sometimes for shits and giggles, sometimes to get a chub on, and sometimes just to do damage for no reason at all. Insurance, perhaps? maybe, called the dance. But at the time, no one knew how this particular fire started, and it was a extremely horrific one. It was October 10th, 1984, a pretty normal day by all accounts. The weather was just fine, sunny but with a chill that would creep in once the sun went to sleep. Halloween was on the fast approach. Pumpkins, ghouls, and skeletons were on parade, while people were listening to Game 2 of the World Series on the radio. At around 6:30 p.m, a small fire started at a grocery store in Pasadena, and dispatched was Captain John L. Orr of the Glendale Fire Department to investigate. It was determined that in this grocery store, someone had set fire to the potato chip, like the crisps display. Bloody hell! Potato chips make surprisingly good kindling, it turns out. The more you know. Unless you're planning on putting that information into practice, then forget about it. You don't know it. Potato chip fires were actually extremely common back in the day, but investigators knew that oftentimes someone will start a small fire to distract from an even bigger one. And a bigger one was coming, and it was coming fast. John Orr hid his identity for years while investigating the very fires he was starting. But would he be able to do that today? Hide his identity for so long? With the amount of data that is collected on each and every...
Mike transitioned into his commercial and I ain't even realize it, y'all. But it's just crazy how this dude, I can't like name a specific story that we have heard of like this before, but we have heard of so many of these stories, man. I feel like one came from Mr. Ballin, y'all. I wish I can remember it right now, of just people telling on themselves, you know what I'm saying, man? Like they being involved with trying to investigate a crime that they freaking a part of. You get what I'm saying? That they trying to investigate a crime that they freaking committed. Put it that way, man. I think it was last week where the video was like that from Mike from that chapter a little bit too. But we getting past the commercial, so we really can get into it. Let's get into it. Take it back right here. Let's go.
And being sold, and Aura will shut it down. Thank you so much to Aura for sponsoring this whole video. Now let's get back to it.
Back to it.
7 miles from that small grocery store fire in southern Pasadena, there Billy and Ada Deal were walking into an Olds home center. This was in that evening around 7:45 p.m. and they were coming in with their grandson, a 2.5-year-old toddler named Matthew. And they, his grandparents, they brought in the little fella and they were saying, if you're good in this home center, while we just pick up bits and bobs, maybe some Halloween decorations. If you're good, we'll bring you to the Baskin and Robbins next door and get you a little ice cream, a little treat for you. Look forward to that. And so in this home center, they split up. Granddad Billy, he went around to look for his own things, while the grandma Ada took Matthew and holding him by his hand, just walking around, having a look. This evening, it was actually remarkably quiet in this home store, like more quiet than usual, which would turn out to be a blessing when a announcement came on the speaker, on like the intercom system in this Olds home center. And it was the kind of announcement that when you hear it, you're like, half the time you don't even listen to those intercom announcements they do in stores. But this one, even if you were listening, you'd be like, what? Did they just say what I think they said? The staff were asking the customers to leave the store immediately. And you wouldn't have even had to have listened to that announcement to know something was very, very wrong when thick black smoke started coming from all directions inside the store. Slowly at first, but then in an instant it flooded the entire store. One of these store employees saw Ada and her grandson and went up to them saying, we need to leave now, follow me. He then began walking for a few steps before turning around, and then he saw that the smoke that had been right behind him had turned into a wall of flames.
Oh.
And Ada and young Matthew were nowhere to be seen.
Oh.
Billy, at the same time, began running around the store as the flames began to grow and grow, desperately trying to find his wife and his grandson before the smoke it was so thick he couldn't see, he couldn't breathe. Eventually, Billy knew that he would collapse if he stayed there any longer, and he managed to find one of the emergency exits at the very rear of the store, completely blind, just feeling his way through, because the fire had been growing and growing and it had cut the electricity in the store, and the store was 18,000 square feet. It was a pretty big store. Deep in the back, it was pitch black, and Billy was extremely lucky to have found the emergency exit because he couldn't breathe at that point, and he managed to get out. He got out of the store just praying he would find them maybe in the parking lot, while the fire continued building and building, sucking all the oxygen out of the building, creating this vacuum, and it was just getting faster and faster, creating this like pit of hell inside this home center. Only a few minutes ago had been this nice, quiet, autumnal evening. All the while, a man was standing outside among the growing crowd, taking pictures of this building being engulfed in flames. And he was getting pretty turned on by what he saw. The fire department soon arrived, and at first they thought they were going to another small potato chip fire in another grocery store, this time only a half mile from the Olds home center. But no, they were going to the Olds itself, and eventually it would be 11 different fire departments would arrive to this home center to try and put out the fire. That's how huge it was, while Billy in the crowd looking for his wife and his grandson. And Billy had suffered severe burns himself. And eventually Matthew's parents, the toddler's parents, they arrived praying to find their 2.5-year-old son. But they hadn't made it out. And neither had 2 others.
Damn.
Ada and toddler Matthew would be killed in the fire, along with 2 store employees. 17-year-old Jimmy Satina and 26-year-old Carolyn Krause, mother of 2. They were murdered by a fire started deliberately, being killed in what must have been unimaginable pain.
And it's like, whoever started this fire, which I think it is the captain or whoever, it's like he don't give a F. Like you know how certain serial killers have like a certain preference for who they want to kill. Like he didn't care if it was a little child, an elderly lady, a young lady, a young man. Like it didn't matter, y'all. And it's just like, what do you get out of this? And then he out there taking pictures of it, like he just basking in the glory of seeing this freaking fire. And that's why I also agree with Mike when he said it was a good thing that the store wasn't as populated as it usually be around that time. You know what I'm saying? Because the more people, when it's involved in a fire, the more people you got running trying to escape, the more chance you have for people getting trampled on and all that type of ish being seen. Oh man, we just started and it's already like, my main question is just why? But I don't think we're going to get an answer that I'm going to like. I don't think I'll like any answer regardless. Let's keep going.
The 2 potato chip fires that had been set up 1.5 mile from the Olds and one about 7 miles from the Olds had been set up as a diversion for the fire departments. So that fire department goes there and then they start this bigger fire that would consume this whole home center. So the arsonist, he went, started those 2, then returned to the Olds and did his business. What he would do was get a cigarette, and then he would get 3 matches and put them alongside the cigarette, then a piece of yellow ruled notebook paper, wrap them in that, and then a rubber band around. Then light the cigarette, place it somewhere near some flammable materials, maybe a couple of these around, light it, leave. That would give you about 15-ish, maybe more minutes till the cigarette burnt down. The ash would create this very dry area. It would then ignite the matches and the notebook paper. Perfect kindling, and things would just go up. The thing was, after the Olds Home Center fire was put out, an investigation would begin. 4 people had died in this horrifying event. It's mad. But the investigation would determine the fire had started accidentally. They believed that it started with like an electrical fault, and then just build and went up because of that. Of course, they were wrong in that determination. It was an arsonist using that cigarette matches device that had started it, but it was determined to be accidental. Except for one arson investigator, fire investigator, who was like, I think it's arson. I think it's arson. Folks, you're wrong. Wasn't an electrical accident. Nuh-uh. I mean, he was saying that because he was the one who started it. That fire, that horrific Olds fire that murdered 4 people, would make up chapter 6 of this book, Points of Origin. Wow. And that was only one of the many fires started by John L. Orr. John L. Orr was one of the most well-known fire investigators in California, and he was noticed that day outside the Olds fire taking pictures of it. And when he was asked, it's like, John, what are you doing here? You're an arson investigator, but we don't even know what happened here. He would say, they just called me for a potato chip fire, like a couple of miles away. So I was in the area, and then I seen this fire and I heard about it. So here I am taking pictures. He was there remarkably early, and John believed that this fire, the Olds Home Centre fire, was started by the same guy who did the two potato chip fires that had just started, one 7 miles away, one half a mile away, like from here. He'd even given this serial arsonist the nickname, the Frito Bandito, named after the Frito-Lay's, brand of potato chips that were often used to start the fire. It's not a great nickname, to be honest. The Frito Bandito, though, had been active for a while, years, and he needed to be stopped. And John Orr was hot on the case of the serial arsonist turned murderer. See, John was more of a cop than he was a firefighter. I mean, he had been a firefighter and then kind of gone up the ranks, and now he was an arson investigator, which is, in the investigative side, it's sort of like a cop. A cop firefighter. I mean, the thing was, John Orr always wanted to be a cop, too. John was born in Glendale in 1949 and had lived in the greater LA area his entire life. Since he could remember, it was cop or fireman, one or the other. And after a stint in the Air Force, 2.5 years, he was discharged and married Jody, his high school sweetheart. He left the military in 1970, returned to Los Angeles, and got a job with a bottled water company. At the time, John and Jody were living with the in-laws, Jody's family, and John did not get on well with them at all. So he spent most of the time either working, or when he wasn't working, he was not in the house. He was either out drag racing or just drinking. You can probably already guess he kind of has a need to, adrenaline junkie a little bit. All the while, though, John was preparing to join the LAPD. However, when John applied, he didn't get in. They didn't let him in. He passed the written exam to get into the police. He passed the physical exam to get into the police department. But interestingly enough, what tripped John up getting into the police department was the Rorschach test. It's kind of funny, really. And I guess, back in the day, you had to do these. Maybe you still have to do Rorschach tests. I don't know, to join the LAPD. But back then, you had to do them. And the doctor, what does this picture make you think of? All that kind of stuff. The doctor would say that John had homosexual impulses. And the LAPD had a zero tolerance policy on that back in the 70s. So, John, by the way, married with one kid and with another on the way. Who knows these things? The doctor concluded that John was passive, resentful, suspicious, confused about his sexuality, and unsuited for a career in law enforcement. An emotionally unstable person, the report said. John tried to get them to reverse this decision, but no dice. So, John thinking, well, okay, I can't be a cop. Fireman it is. In fact, when he had been in the Air Force, his job in the military had been to be an Air Force fireman, so. Thing was, John loved fire from a very early age, going back to when he was a little fella, a little tyke, knee-high to a grasshopper. A fire started in the alley behind his house, mysteriously started. And John, he was always around these scenes of fires as a kid. And I know that just happens when you're a kid and you're kind of out and about, especially back in this day, but a lot of fires mysteriously started around John, and he just loved when the fire department would show up. It was like the bee's knees, it was the dog's bollocks. He was also known to set off illegal fireworks, like all the time, which, like in the hills of LA, which would then start off these bigger fires, and he would just like get the chair out, get a beer out, enjoy the show when the firefighters showed up. So surprisingly...
So this dude, he basically been doing this since a child. You know what I'm saying? Setting fires and watching the fire burn. You know what I'm saying? And just acting like he ain't got nothing to do with it. This go all the way back to his freaking childhood with this ish. So I wish that the investigators or whoever would have got hipped a lot faster than they gonna get hipped in this story to actually being him. You know what I'm saying? That been setting these freaking fires. But it's also one thing I want to say that's different with this story, y'all, is just the fact that he is actually putting this ish in his book. He telling on himself in his damn book about what the freak he did. That's like another level of just snitching on yourself, I will say, y'all, that makes this story a little more different. And even just hearing a story about a freaking arson anyway, you know what I'm saying? A person who set fires to ish anyway is a little different. But at the end of the day, not only are they freaking committing arson, they are committing murder. He murdered those 4 people, man. He need life in prison just for that. But come to find out, he got a lot more history before that, and I think it's gonna be a lot more even after that incident that he gonna do. Let's keep going.
Or maybe not so. It was in 1973 that John was accepted into the Los Angeles Fire Department for a bit because he did not pass the physical in the LA Fire Department. He flunked out of that when they gave him the boot. So, John, couldn't get into the LAPD, couldn't get into the LAFD. So, what's the next place? Glendale. I'm going to be a Glendale firefighter. They accepted him. He was in there like swimwear. He was successful from the start. He did have some issues with taking orders, but overall he was nailing it. He was quickly rising through the ranks and seemed passionate about fire prevention and safety. Around this time, he also left his wife Jody. He did the real cool-ass thing as well, where his wife Jody and his 2 daughters, he left them, cleaning out the joint bank account as he did so, and was like, I'm starting fresh, I'm living in Glendale, I'm living the dream. So I guess it's no surprise that the main source I'm using for this video, Burned, is written by Frank Girardeau and Lori Ann Kovac. Lori Ann Kovac is one of his daughters, so I guess she wasn't too pleased with him for that move. He remarried to another woman named Sheila, but that marriage only lasted about a year. It was then that in the mid-70s, a number of fires started in department stores around Glendale, and they were believed, even back then, to have been the work of one man, a serial arsonist. This would lead to millions of dollars in damages, but they had just no idea, who was doing this. Now, John was learned to be, a good studier. He was doing college courses, in the evenings, and he would have side jobs. And he kept rising through the ranks, and he eventually landed the job as fire investigator with the Glendale FD. So he would go to these department stores, try and find out who was starting all these fires. He couldn't figure it out. He was like, jeez, who's doing this? Who was doing this? Now, John never caught that guy, amazingly. But he became known in the fire department as Officer Orr because he took his job so seriously. It was like, finally, he was a cop. He would go around catching arsonists, serial arsonists, other ones. He would go around, he carried a gun, a Magnum. He would get into car chases. He would beat the ever-living shite out of suspects when he caught them. I think his job was just to find them, identify them, and then call the actual police, whose job it was to arrest. But John was like, yeah, I'm a bit of a maverick. We do things John's way. And so he got in trouble quite a few times for basically dramatically overstepping his job description, which was just to stop fire starters and, lead to their apprehension and investigate who caused these things. And John was basically Dirty Harry. That's who he viewed himself. As I said, his superiors believed that arson investigators do not need to carry a firearm. But John wanted it, so he took it. That was old John boy. And fires continued to break out in Glendale, and he was always on the scene trying to find the point of origin. The point of origin, where did the fire start? What was the kindling? What led to, this building burning down or this wildfire, houses, whatever it was. And that's when John began to discover the old cigarette matches, paper, rubber band routine. He was like, man, all these fires seem to be started by the same person. You light a few of them, place them near flammable material, baby, you got a fire going. John actually learned of that first from arresting some small-time arsonists, and he was like, it's pretty good. And though John didn't have 100% clearance rate, because some fire starters just continued to elude him, he was also very good at catching other fire starters. You probably already are thinking this, it takes a crook to catch a crook. And John was a very good arsonist, and he knew his way around fires, so much so that he was rising through the ranks. It was like, if you have a fire and you're having trouble solving it, who lit this fire, what was the point of origin, any kind of difficulty in an arson investigation, call up Glendale FD, get them to send John Orr over. He will figure this out for you. He was like,
boy, it take one to know one, don't it? It take a freaking arsonist to know who the freaking arsonist is.
Like the super arson investigator. He was so well respected, not just in LA, Glendale, in California, on the West Coast entirely. He began writing articles for, the trade journals. He would give talks, seminars, conferences. He was hot shit. Literally hot shit. But not hot, and you know what I mean. This would continue over the years, so much so that in 1984, when the Olds Home Center fire broke out, John was recognized at the scene, and he was asked at the time, what do you think you know everything about there is to know about how fires start, dangerous fires start. What do you think could have caused this? As I said, John was allegedly in the area at the time because of the Frito Bandito. He had noticed all of these potato chip fires starting, and he was worried they were a distraction for this. He was determined to catch the Frito Bandito, and then when he arrived, though, at the Olds, he heard about it on the radio, he's seen the smoke, he arrives there, and he says, could be the same perp I've been tracking for years now. Lighting a cigarette with the matches, notebook paper, poof. You know what he probably did? He probably left that little incendiary device at the back of the store, where they keep the plastic foam padding for pillows. Extremely flammable. You light a couple around there, baby, it's going up. It's going up in seconds. If you lit them up, you would have 15 minutes. That's enough time to make a hasty retreat. You'll never be spotted. Or enough time to easily just walk around the block, stand in the car park, and take pictures of the building that's going up in flames. However, John wasn't the one to investigate the Olds Home Center fire, as it was a quadruple homicide. So therefore, it was very much a police matter, and they were the ones who determined it to be, this electrical fire, this accidental fire. A determination John heavily disagreed with at the time. And he made his voice known that he did not think that this was an accident. He believed it was the work of the Frito Bandito. It was almost like he wanted to give him credit or something. Now, as I said, many people, they absolutely sided with John. He knew what he was talking about, and he had this real keen insight into the mind of a very twisted arsonist. He knew what he was talking about. He studied this very seriously, he took his job very seriously, and he was very, very popular. And he was addicted to fire. I mean, that's like what his colleagues thought. John is just addicted to fire. He just loves it. He would have sex with fire if he could. Little did they know how actually addicted to fire he was, and how much it turned him on. And so, when only a few days after the Olds Home Center fire, another fire broke out in a separate hardware store in North Hollywood, but it seemed like so similar to what happened in Olds, people were now listening to John. People were taking his advice. Now, thankfully, at this separate hardware store, the separate fire in North Hollywood, no lives lost, damage wasn't nearly extensive. It was actually put out before the fire could really take hold and burn the store down. But it was clear.
Well, thank God that nobody died in that one. But dude, John is one of those type of freaking murderers or serial killers, because we might as well call him Ned at this point. He killing multiple people. You know what I'm saying? He one of those type of killers that's not gonna stop. He gonna keep repeating the same freaking murderous crime over and over and over and over and over again until he gets caught. Just point blank period. We already see how this going.
Clear there was a very dangerous person there. And then, only a couple of months later, another Olds Home Center had a fire. It almost burnt. Now again, this time, thankfully, no lives were lost, but a fire started again. It seemed like under the very, very same circumstances. And this fire, at this other Olds Home Center, it started in the pillow section, just like John believed the original, deadly Olds Home Center fire had started. I mean, come on, it's got to be the same guy. This is clear as day. This third home center fire, a staff member actually was walking through the store and smelled smoke coming from the pillow department, where they keep this plastic foam for these pillows, saw the smoldering and managed to put it out before the fire again really took hold. Now, these 3 home center fires, they hadn't been officially linked, but I mean, word was spreading in the fire investigator arson community. Everyone was like, "Do you hear what John Orr is saying? I think he might be onto something." And more people would be interested. They would attend these conferences where John would give these talks. And a number of fires over the following few years, oftentimes fires breaking out near these conferences where John was giving talks, would be staggering. Absolutely staggering. In January 1987, Fresno was holding the California Conference of Arson Investigators. It would be a 3-day seminar with talks from John Orr, police, fire, all sorts of industry experts. A real hoot and a holler, it would be some crack. But over the course of those 3 days, almost half a dozen different stores in nearby towns would have fires break out. A pharmacy, a fabric store, a craft retail store, an outdoor store, a thrift store. No one was killed, but some of these stores would be completely destroyed and people, losing their livelihood, losing their jobs. And like so many of these fires would be determined to start with a cigarette, 3 matches, yellow ruled notebook paper, and a rubber band. At the time though, all of these fires, they weren't really linked, even though some fires would start in one store and then an hour later another store would go up in flames, but they weren't linked because each of these towns that had fires, they all had separate fire departments. So they wouldn't be able to, they weren't like communicating about what they were experiencing. Not at this point anyway. So although all the fires were starting in the same way, they didn't know the extent of it. If they did know, boy, would they shit your pants time. Amazingly though, in one of these fires, in one of these stores, they found something they hadn't found before. They found the incendiary device. It hadn't burned up. Usually it would have been embers. It's a cigarette, matches, and paper. Just ash at the end of the day. But this time it had been found. It had been in like a plastic bin filled with pillows. And they'd found a smoldering and they'd put it out before it had actually gone up. But the weird thing was, that yellow rolled notebook paper they would always find? It would usually be freaking ash. But this time they found it and it was almost whole. They almost had a whole piece of the notebook paper, which meant for the first time, they possibly could have fingerprints on the paper, which they never would have had before because the incendiary device would just burn up.
Yep. And that's what goes kind of back to what I was just saying earlier, man. When you keep on just doing the same crime over and over and over again, eventually you gonna slip up in some type of way. Eventually something is gonna slip up, which is in this case the freaking paper didn't burn all the way, and now possibly your fingerprints or DNA is on it, John. And I hope it is, cause I'm ready for your ass to go to fucking prison, man. This is crazy, y'all. I have never heard of an arsonist story like this before. Like, this dude is a serial. I'm talking about serial arsonists out here, setting all these different places on fire while they're having some type of convention that he's a major part of and just such an advocate of safety and fire safety and all this, and he an investigator, and come to find out, motherfucker, is you who doing this ish. I'm starting to get peed off at this story, y'all, because it's so ridiculous how much he is committing the crime and investigating the crime at the same time, and just pointing the finger directly towards himself. But nobody knows, so I'm just gonna keep doing it and doing it and doing it until eventually somebody finds out. This is crazy.
The fires would start to become linked with more and more investigators speaking to one another, and due to the area they were in, the MO being the same, the types of stores hit, the incendiary device responsible. Sometimes the device had a coin attached, so the arsonist was also given the name the coin tosser. It was all believed to have been the work of one person. Federal authorities, as this took place over a large area, would take over the case, the ATF. Now with that surviving notebook paper, they were thinking, let's run it through the system. Let's see what fingerprints it'll bring up. But no match. No firebugs in town already. Somebody whose fingerprints they might, like a criminal whose fingerprints they might already have in the system. So who was it then? If it wasn't already a known criminal, who could it be? Fires had started in Fresno, Tulare, and Bakersfield, all sort of in a straight line to each other. So where would the serial arsonist strike next? It was 2 years later, March 1989, at another arson investigator conference, that he did. Morro Bay had a fire. Salinas, Atascadero, San Luis Obispo. Over this week-long period, 5 stores would be engulfed in flames. Same device, same MO. Once again, all towns and cities you would be driving through, close to the highway. Now, the fact that all of the fires were likely done by the same person, done near a fire, ironically, near a fire investigator conference, and all done in towns close to highways, and the towns were all kind of almost sort of in a straight line, as in you were on the highway, go off, start a fire, back on the highway, drive up another couple of miles, next town, rinse and repeat. So all of that could lead you to theorize that the person starting the fire was attending the fire conferences and was not from this area because they stuck to the highway. They weren't going off into these, little towns that'd be ways away. They weren't going out to the boonies. They were sticking to the highway, so therefore they were not familiar with the area. Well, detectives thought so, and they thought this was a theory that has some meat in its bones. So they began to cross-reference who attended the fire conferences back in 1987, and now who is attending the fire conferences now in 1989 in Morro Bay. So they cross-referenced all the list of attendees of who'd attended both. And that gave them a list of 10 names. All were investigators or worked in that field. They cross-referenced those 10 names with the fingerprints they'd found. But yet again, no match.
Damn.
No match. Over the course of the following 18 months, there would be over 24 fires in the greater Los Angeles area. One of the most severe was in the College Hills area, doing incredible damage to the homes there, destroying or damaging 67.
I mean, this dude has set so many places and caused so many fires, y'all, too. It make you almost wonder, like, damn, is he working with somebody else? Do he have a team of people with him? Like, to just think that this is one man causing all this freaking damage is crazy.
The fire was under control. Captain John Orr went to investigate this fire to find the point of origin. And the thing was, a witness had seen who they believed could have started the fire. They said it was a man, 5'10", dark hair, was wearing khaki pants. And this time the fire had actually a different incendiary device, simple butane lighter, not the usual cigarette thing. But yeah, one of the weird things about this, and John Orr's partner would kind of bring this up later, was that usually when John Orr would have a case that he was, investigating, he would be hound-dogging it. He'd be pounding the pavement, determined to solve it, and wouldn't stop on an arson case until he had solved it and caught the culprit. Except for a couple of cases, like this case. He was didn't really want to solve it, wasn't hitting it too hard, wasn't questioning the witness who had seen the alleged person doing it, wasn't questioning them too hard, just seemed to another one of life's great mysteries, I guess. On the shelf. Let's go for a beer.
And the reason he not really trying to investigate this one, because he know his ass might be caught with this one. He know that damn witness seen him as what he or she was describing. And that's why I think he was involved in all the other cases, because he knew that there was no evidence to really point him towards being the person who actually started the fire. That's why he was so engaged. But now that it may be some evidence that points towards him, he trying to just blow it off and not pay attention to it. Man, I wish these other police, I just wish he would have got caught a lot earlier for this ish, man. This man done just done set the world on fire, so to speak, Bean Team. I know I'm using hyperbole, but you get what I'm saying, man. This man done caused a lot of fire damage.
Eventually got to the point that a task force was set up to catch this serial arsonist, who at this point was given the name the Pillow Pyro, because so many of the fires had been set with, pillow filling, pillow foam, that plasticky material. They all had the same all the same geographic location in Los Angeles. That's what they thought, because then they would speak to fire investigators from Fresno, Bakersfield, Northern California, and they would learn the same guy who had been starting these fires in LA had been traveling around the state quite a bit. It was actually just a pure accident that they even stumbled across, and they knew that the Pillow Pyro had been active near these fire conferences outside of Los Angeles. They were just having one of their weekly meetings, and they were talking about the Pillow Pyro. This is his MO, yada yada yada. And one of the fire investigators from Fresno is like, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I think we had that guy too. We had fires, numerous fires, started with the same MO, and we never caught the guy. And then they would learn about the fires in Atascadero, Morro Bay, all those other places. They were hearing this, and the hairs back of the neck fully erect. They were like, he's way more prolific and scary than we ever believed. And this guy was just getting more and more dangerous. He hadn't even been linked to the Olds Home Center fire, the deadly one. Not yet. As Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles area was the latest to be hit in quick succession with so many fires, and then the two other places had been conferences, both close to highways. They believed he probably lived in LA and had been traveling north, and then didn't know the areas that well, so would only jump off the highway a little bit, start a fire, shits and giggles, giggling as he ran, almost killing people, destroying livelihoods, millions of dollars in damages. They did have a few suspects, and they had a couple of witness accounts, but oftentimes the witness accounts would like conflict with each other, so they didn't really have anything to go off of. They only had that one single fingerprint from the paper that hadn't gone up in flames, but that hadn't matched. This time, however, that single fingerprint, word of it that they had found it, word of it reached the ATF, and they wanted it. And they had much more extensive fingerprint testing technology than the local police in like Fresno and Bakersfield had. Their technology was just, it was much more extensive databases, more sophisticated testing techniques. So hopefully this time they might be able to figure out who had done it. But of course, when they were sending this to the fingerprint to be tested, they had to keep it absolutely hush-hush. Because of the fact that a lot of these fires have been started, deliberately, they hadn't found the guy, and the fire conferences started near arson conferences, they genuinely started to believe it could be one of us. It could be an inside job. One of our guys, one of our own is doing this. It took then about 24 hours for the fingerprint testing to get back to them. And, when they answered the call from the fingerprint lads down at the lab, they were pretty shocked because they couldn't understand what the guy on the end of the phone was saying. The ATF agent who was looking into this, responsible for the case, was named April. And she was told on the phone by the fingerprint guy, listen, can you tell the guys to start wearing gloves when they're investigating these arsons? Your arson investigators need to get the finger out of their arse and do their job. The fingerprint we found belongs to an arson investigator. Tell him to wear gloves next time. He works in Glendale. His name is Captain John Orr. Can you tell him to do his job properly, please? He's messing up the investigation. But then, of course... That's
so crazy, man. Like, the people who did the fingerprint DNA identifier thingy, like, they in disbelief, like, their mind is not even allowing them to think it's actually John or who freaking did it. They just thinking like he was investigating because he is an investigator. In some kind of way he messed up and put his fingerprint on it. Like, that is crazy, dude. You never know, Bing Team. You never know because he a captain at that. You know what I'm saying? It can be a person in a profession at the top of the freaking profession. You know what I'm saying? The tippity freaking top, and that don't mean that they ain't doing some evil intentions, evil-ish inside of it either. This is crazy, man. I know I keep saying it over and over and over again, but it's just like, dude, just the way that he got away with this ish, and the way that nobody within this profession thought that he had anything that it could ever possibly be John, not Captain John Orr. Yes, it is.
They quickly realized, but John didn't investigate any fires there. John wasn't on the scene. In fact, if John's fingerprint was found on this paper, well, there's no good reason that John's fingerprint should be found on that paper. So that only kind of left other reasons it could be found on that paper. And then they quickly realized, oh, wait, John attended both of those conferences. That conference in, Fresno, and then that other conference in Morro Bay. He had been there, attending them both. He was not from either of those areas. He lived in Glendale, and Glendale, it's close to the highway that would take you to both of these places. They had a lot of fires in Glendale anyway.
And now they putting all the pieces together.
But it can't be John Orr, the king of arson investigators, the person who was the first on every scene, had a near miraculous ability to solve, to find points of origin, to find out these burnt out fires, especially when the points of origin for so many of these fires was a cigarette with matches on paper and a rubber band that would, it's all made of wood. None of these things should be left behind, but he was still able to, oh, look, that's how the fire started, when all the other arson investigators were scratching their head. So he was there, he was able to solve all these fires. His fingerprint was found. That only leaves you with one explanation. John Orr is the Pillow Pyro. April and the ATF began to surveil John, especially as there was a seminar in San Luis Obispo he was attending, and they believed he would attempt to light a fire going or coming from. He was watched the entire time. There was even a tracking device placed on his car. He was driving like a maniac though, almost like he knew he was being followed. Like someone had let slip, they had found his fingerprint, which was a possibility for sure. They were watching him the entire time. They watched John as he walked into a corner store, went in there, bought 2 packets of Marlboro Reds, and then walked out. John Orr didn't smoke. Then, one of the mornings in San Luis Obispo, John was walking to his car, gets out of his little motel room, walks to his car, and stops dead. And he comes and leans under his car. And they were like watching him, thinking, oh shit, he has found the tracking device on the car. Now, he didn't touch it. In fact, what John did was leap into his car and begin just absolutely emptying the gas tank, driving down the road. Now, the surveillance team knew what he was doing. They believed John was going to drive to a police station. So they called up the police first, the police station he was going to, and they were like, this guy will be into you in a couple of minutes. He's found something on his car. Tell him it's a fake bomb that's been put there as a prank. And when John arrived to the police, that's what, oh yeah, that. It's a fake bomb. Somebody's trying to, shits and giggles. Don't worry about it. And John believed it was a fake bomb that had been set there just to scare him, and it was just a joke. During the entire time they were following him, though, he never started a fire. They also began to print out photos of him to show to witnesses who had allegedly seen the pillow pyro, and a few said he for sure looked like the man they saw. They also placed another tracking device in his vehicle, a little more sophisticated than the previous one, and couldn't be spotted without removing the dashboard. Then, something really, really weird happened, and I know it's been pretty weird up to this point, but John's superior at the Glendale Fire Department, who was the deputy chief, he called up the ATF because he knew they were investigating John as the pillow pyro. Calls him over and says, here, look at this. You won't believe what John gave me. He gave me a manuscript for a book he's writing. It's real weird. And the manuscript was titled Points of Origin. The novel, it's real shit, is about an arsonist named Aaron Stiles, John Orr, and he's basically the villain. John is basing the villain of the story, the arsonist, on himself, who's being chased by this arson investigator named Phil. As I said, it's really not very good. The villain, Aaron, is a firefighter and a rapist, and John's ex-wives would say he liked to roleplay that in bed, like sexual assault. He loved roleplaying that in bed, like putting on balaclavas and attacking them. He loved doing that. He would always light candles in the bedroom for when they were, doing it. And basically, fire made him very, turned on. And Aaron is the very same firefighter. Arsonist, fires get bigger and bigger and bigger, and he gets turned on by every time he lights a fire. The novel was like basically John Orr's diary. It was so close to his own life and actual fires that had started in LA. It was literally like reading his diary. The devices, when fires started, where they started, and spoiler alert, by the way, for how you're curious how the novel ends, it ends in this burning warehouse with Agent Phil, arson investigator Phil, shooting Aaron dead in the fire. I don't know, did John see himself as both the villain and the hero? So the ATF were reading this, and their jaws dropped. Especially when they got to chapter 6. John Orr had changed the names of Ada and Matthew to Madeline and Terrence, and the store that went on fire was called Cal's, not Oles, in southern Pasadena. But basically, other than that, it's the exact same of what actually happened, that real life tragic fire. They're shopping in there, and then a fire breaks out. Let me just read you out a section from chapter 6. This is after the fire started, and Madeline and young Terrence, the toddler, are being led out by an employee, just like in real life. The smoke, chokingly thick, was stealing their oxygen quickly and causing disorientation. She heard Terrence's sobs. She now felt the heat and saw flames in front of them. Terrence's grip loosened from her neck, and he slipped down her body as they crawled. Unable to go any further, she felt the employee's hand drop hers. He continued on. The last thing she heard was a tremendous roar as the fire burned through the roof and vented to the outside. The smoke momentarily lifted, but then was replaced by a solid wall of fire as the entire contents of the annex exploded into flames. Their last breaths were of 800-degree heat that seared their throats closed. He was writing about what he did, and he writes about it like he's just relishing it. He really enjoyed murdering those 4 people. Writing about their...
just going into all the details and everything about it being team. And like Mike said, relishing in this freaking disgustingness that he have done. I'm even a little child. He know it was a little child.
Final moments in a very disgusting kind of way. It was in November 1991 that John appeared at the scene of multiple fires before he should have even been able, as an arson investigator, before he appeared at the scene like before he was even called. A fire would start, a big one, and he would just be like, "Oh, lads, I'm here. I just happened to be in the area. I'll help sort it out for you." For example, there was a fire at a Warner Brothers studio, movie set place in Burbank, California, and the fire started and John was called. And so he'd be like, "Yeah, once again, I just happened to be in the area. I'll be right over." And so a guy, one of the firefighters goes outside and is like, this big, huge movie lot. I'll have to show you where the fire is. So he kind of goes and waits at the entrance and is like, "Where's John?" He's waiting there for ages. John never shows up. She was like, "All right." He heads back to the fire, and John is already there. And he's like, "How did you find this place? There's no way you should have known exactly where this fire was inside this big, huge movie studio place." John figured it out. Another time, one fireman was driving down the road and he sees John coming in the opposite direction. He was like, "How are you, John?" Leaves and keeps on driving. And then he notices in his rearview mirror about 10-15 minutes later, he sees a shitload of smoke in his rearview mirror. And now that they had this tracker on John, they were able to boop, 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 fire, 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 fire. It was finally in December of 1991 that John Orr was arrested by ATF agents. He was charged with 5 counts of arson, which is far fewer than he actually did. When the police and the agents, they searched his home, they found a load of those incendiary devices and the makings of those incendiary devices, matches, cigarettes, even though he didn't smoke, all that kind of thing. They also found pictures and videos of the fires he had set.
Wow.
Before and after pictures. Like, how would you know this place is going to go to fire? How did you have this exact picture before the fire actually started? It was almost like you knew it was going to start. But of course, when John was confronted with all of this, he'd be like, "That's just for seminars. This is a teaching tool for other arson investigators. I'm helping them out." Denying being the pillow pyro. And word began to spread around, in the firefighting community about John Orr's arrest, and more people would come forward and say, "Oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. He was on the scene of this fire before he was even called." Or we had a fire, we called John, and the fire got worse.
And then just for him to have the audacity to be denying this ish when every freaking damn near piece of evidence points to you being the pillow pyro, John. At this point, dude, all this, like, it ain't like you done did this 1 or 2 times. You lucky they only charged you with 5 of them. That's crazy too. But after all this, you still want to sit up here and deny that you have done anything wrong. Seriously?
He went on trial in 1992. He pleaded not guilty. However, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for each of the 5 arson accounts, to run consecutively. He would be charged with more and pleaded guilty to 3 more charges of arson. However, in 1994, he was charged with 4 counts of murder for the Olds Home Center fire for killing Ada, Matthew, Jimmy, and Carolyn. That trial began in 1998 and did not go well for John L. Orr. He'd already pleaded guilty to other similar fires, and the novel even has that chapter that is exactly the same way his fire played out. In 1998, at the end of his trial, he was found guilty on all charges. The prosecution argued for the death penalty. However, the jury could not come to a unanimous verdict on that, so he was sentenced to 4 terms of life without parole.
Got sexual gratification out of setting fires. Today, Orr declined to address the court, and Judge Robert Perry sentenced him to 4 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole.
I find that 4 concurrent life without parole terms are appropriate for counts 1 through 4, and they are now imposed.
Hearing the sentence, Orr seemed passive, but relatives of people killed in fires he set wanted the death penalty, an eye for an eye.
He gets to see his grandson. He gets to just enjoy breathing and being alive. And that's more than our families are going to be able to do.
At the Glendale Fire Department, where John Orr worked, former colleagues said, "Good riddance to bad rubbish."
I think he's very sick. It's very disappointing to work with someone and think that they have the same motivations that you do and find that they don't.
Leaving court, John Orr will now spend the rest of his life in prison. He was also convicted on 20 counts of arson for setting the 1990 College Hills fire in Glendale.
John Orr is still alive in prison to this day, still maintaining his innocence to this day. And it was while he was in prison he actually finished Points of Origin. Maybe the investigator Phil shooting Aaron Stiles, the arsonist, dead was like symbolic of his own arson career dying. Or some shit like that. It's a terrible book. John Orr wanted fame. He wanted the Pillow Pyro to be as notorious as he possibly could. Like, for example, when the Olds Home Center fire, was determined to be accidental by those other investigators, an electrical accident, John was furious. He was saying, no, it's the Frito Bandito, who would later be known as the Pillow Pirate. That it was arson. It was arson, guys. I swear to God, it was arson. He was so annoyed that the arsonist wasn't getting the credit for it, and it was determined to be accidental. He even wrote in his book, the account, after the fictional, wink wink, fictional Cal's fire in chapter 6, he wrote this: "There was never a follow-up investigation. The fire was ineptly termed accidental. Aaron was so furious that he set a nearly identical fire 2 days later in Hollywood at another hardware store. The investigating agency termed the fire arson, but no correlation was made to the Cal's fire." That's literally what happened in real life. That's insane. To this day, though, John Orr says that he was set up, he was framed, that they were investigating him as the Pillow Pyro, and once they stumbled across his manuscript for Points of Origin, that's when they were like, okay, this is it, and they framed him, basically because he admitted, oh yeah, the book is based on real life, cases, right, what you know? The book was based on real life shit I investigated, but it's not what I actually did. That's stupid, that's dumb as all shit. Wink wink. So, but that's what he says. He says that just because his book mirrored real life, he didn't do it. Ignoring the fact that after he was arrested, there was no more attacks from the Pillow Pyro. I mean, John Orr was a fire starter. He was a twisted fire starter, folks. He was somebody who adrenaline, it turned him on. He was lighting fires and setting these fires in places when he was a toddler, in back alleys. And then as he got older, he would drink beer, setting these wildfires with illegal fireworks. And when he became an arson investigator and a firefighter, he didn't just stop because he was addicted to the fire, the rush it gave him, the sexual excitement he got from doing it. And eventually he got a job investigating himself. That's gonna end well. Olds Home Center fire that claimed 4 was a quadruple murder, and he would have killed again if he hadn't written a very, very bad book. Thank you so much for watching, folks. It really means the absolute world to me if you're here. As I said, for this whole video, my research was Burned by Frank Girardot and Lori Ann Kovac. That's his daughter. Lori Ann is his daughter. So that's really, really good. And also Points of Origin, which is really, really bad. And that's actually John Orr's book. I don't recommend that one. It's terribly written, but it's kind of interesting. So it's a little bit of something there, I guess. As always, if you're looking for some more of That Chapter, please check out the That Chapter Patreon. $2 a month, early access to every single video, a Patreon only Discord, and there's a Patreon only playlist there too. Or you can check out the That Chapter podcast. Every single Monday morning is a brand new podcast exclusive episode, podcast exclusive story told only on a podcast. So please check it out. But until the next old video, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, because I love you. Mike out.
Man,
let's begin with.
I got a lot of different takeaways from this one, Bean Team. First of all, it is always a delight when we get to go back to Mike on a Wednesday, y'all. But first of all, like I said, man, I have heard us have watched some videos about arsonists over here on our channel, but never, I don't remember no video watching to that freaking level of a freaking arsonist. Like, this dude was a serial freaking fire starter out here, Bean Team. And then just the fact that he actually, it started from a young age to a teenager to an adult to him actually becoming part of the fire department or the safety team or whatever the freak he was. He was the captain of something. You know what I'm saying, man? To come to find out, he the one setting the fires. But I also want to say that I'm very happy that he eventually ended up getting charged with those 4 murders, and he was found guilty of those, and that basically gave him 4 counts of life in prison. I'm very happy for that. But at the same time, it is kind of like just upsetting or disappointed that he's so freaking old now. You know what I'm saying? He got all the gray in his head. He an old man now in prison. He got caught at an old age. I wish he would have got caught a long time ago, Bean Team, and a lot more fires when it never even freaking happened. And it's also crazy when you look at the fact that he say he ain't did it, but like Mike said, as soon as we lock you up, all the what a freak did what the freak his name is, the fire starter. Let's just call him the fire starter. It's crazy how the fire starter just disappeared after we locked your ass up, Captain John Orr. And it's also crazy about his book, Bean Team. The man telling on himself in his own book, and that not only describing every scene, every fire that he done started, like verbatim, you know what I'm saying, like giving huge details. He also showing that he displeasured that people weren't realizing that it was actually an arsonist that was doing these fires and not just happening accidentally. Like no, that wasn't accidental. Somebody actually did that, and I'm pretty sure who did that did this one and did that one. Like the dude this is my last thing, y'all, because I know we've been here long enough. This is my last thing. I'm gonna let y'all go. He one of those ones where not only is he telling on himself, but it's almost like he know that he telling on himself to the point where he wants to get caught. Like he seriously, maybe it's just subconscious in the back of his brain and he not thinking about it consciously like that. But in the back of his brain, he was basically telling himself, I'm gonna keep pushing the envelope, seeing how far I can go until one day I freaking get caught. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just at least how I interpret it, Bean Team. But I don't know. All I know is this was crazy, and this was another great That Chapter Wednesday. And I digress. I'm gonna go and let y'all go, Bean Team. I appreciate y'all coming on back as always. And before you leave, just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and do all that if you ain't did that yet. And remember this: love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.
If you're feeling lonely today, come along and throw your cares away.